This is FilmBookCast.
FilmBookCast.
FilmBookCast, the official podcast of FilmBook. Get ready for the latest in film news, TV show news, and theatrical reviews. FilmBook's podcast starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to FilmBookCast, the official podcast of FilmBook, a podcast about all things movie and television. My name is Tyler Saito. If you are tuning into FilmBookCast for the first time, what I do on this podcast is discuss the current week's movie and television news. At the end of this podcast, I will review a film currently in theater. Find more FilmBookCast podcasts on film-book.com by using the search term FilmBookCast. You can also email us at podcast@film-book.com with FilmBookCast in the subject line. If you like what you hear on this podcast, please hit the subscribe button. All right, let's get it started. As always, plenty of movie and television news. So first thing I want to talk about is The Righteous Gemstones. A new trailer was released. It is a show on HBO with Danny McBride, John Goodman, Adam Devine, and it's basically about a televangelist family who's crooked. A comedy, of course, with Danny McBride. It's almost always a comedy. It looks extremely funny. It looks well written so far. I mean, it was just a teaser trailer, but it looks just the right amount of over the top to be funny, not too over the top, not Eastbound and Down, Danny McBride over the top, but still pretty funny. HBO is looking to kind of fill that void. They have Watchmen as well coming, but since Game of Thrones ended, they've really been trying to put a lot of shows on HBO and also saying that they're going to do the prequels for Game of Thrones. But this show, I mean, it looks funny. I haven't seen much of Danny McBride lately. He's been here and there. I really enjoyed Eastbound and Down. Like I said, it doesn't seem like it's going to be as over the top, but it still was very funny. John Goodman, I always love John Goodman. He's great in everything. So yeah, it looks like a good comedy. Just kind of riffing on the Joel Osteens of the world, all of the televangelists that are extremely wealthy. So it's good material. And I'm just surprised no one's done it yet. It's just the joke is there from the private jets and the multi-million-dollar mansions. I'm surprised nobody's really picked up on it and kind of made a show with a similar concept. Unless they haven't, I just don't know about it, which is entirely possible. But I mean more recently. So I like the concept. Crooked televangelist family, dysfunctional. John Goodman, Danny McBride, Adam Devine. So I'm looking forward, and that premieres in August. So August on HBO. And some streaming news. Everyone knows Stranger Things Season 3 came out on Netflix on the 4th of July. But before I get to that, I wanted to talk about another show that I recently watched. It came out in middle of June on Amazon Prime Video, and it is Too Old to Die Young. Has Miles Teller in it, has Nell Tiger-Free in it, has John Hawkes, and I loved it. It's if you like Nicholas Refn, I would definitely recommend it. If you don't, then I can't recommend it. I don't think you'll enjoy it. It's extremely slow. It's very, very apparent that Refn just did what he wanted to do. He took his time, he did his thing. It's definitely self-indulgent, it's definitely pretentious, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a neo-noir type story set in LA. There's multiple storylines, but the main one focuses on a dirty cop played by Miles Teller, who he gets in a lot of trouble, to put it lightly. So if you're into that kind of stuff, that gritty crime, like I said, if you're a Refn fan, if you've seen Drive, if you've seen Only God Forgives, stuff like that, then this is definitely for you, because it's that stuff but amped up to 100, because Refn has no limits on this series. It's extremely long. That's another thing that might be off-putting, and the pacing is very slow. I think most of the episodes are like an hour and a half, and I think it clocks in at around 13 hours. but it's just gorgeous. And I like the story a lot. There are a lot of... This is one show that kind of split people right down the middle. They loved it or hated it. And I tend to gravitate towards that stuff a little bit more than shows or movies that just want to appeal to everyone. So I don't know. If you're into Refn, definitely watch. If not, if you're not into it, don't, because you will absolutely hate it. Like I said, the pacing is very, very slow. The dialogue is kind of plodding and precise, I would say. But I would say at least give it a shot. Try and watch the first episode. If you don't like it, that's the thing about streaming. You can always just turn it off. You can always just go to watch something else. You didn't pay any money if you already have a Prime subscription. So I would just give it a watch. That's Too Old to Die Young. And, of course, Stranger Things Season 3 came out. Finished that as well. Again, I won't talk about any spoilers. But it was very enjoyable. Again, I recommend Stranger Things to basically anyone. I mean, I think it's pretty accessible on the most basic level. It's just a lot of fun. Visually, it's appealing. I enjoy the 80s aesthetic. I can't be nostalgic about the 80s because I'm 25, but I enjoy the look of the show, the costume design, the set design, all of that. The characters are likable. The plot's interesting. It's sci-fi, 80s, so I don't think you can really go wrong with that. It was good, and Ethan Hawke's daughter is actually in it as well. She's one of the new characters that's introduced. So definitely, I'm sure most people have seen the first 2 seasons, but I thought this it was a good season, and we'll see if there's another one, because I haven't heard if they have renewed Stranger Things for Season 4 or not. So, I can't see that they wouldn't, because I'm sure it brought in a massive amount of viewers, but just don't think it's been reported yet. So that's Stranger Things Season 3. And we got a new trailer for The Boys, a new Amazon original show, a superhero show about people who are not superheroes killing superheroes, kind of flipping it on its head, the anti-Marvel, going with that. Carl Urban is kind of the marquee name for this show, and I'm interested, I'm intrigued. I liked Watchmen a lot. As I've said before, I enjoy the Marvel movies, but I'm not a Marvel fanboy. And this looks interesting. It introduced some of the characters, the trailer did, and kind of showed a bit of the plot, a bit of the world more than the plot. But it's an interesting premise to me, having this group, the boys, trying to keep these superheroes who are kind of drunk with power in check. I hope it brings a lot of eyeballs, because to me that's just more intriguing than a lot of the Marvel storylines. And Carl Urban, I love Carl Urban. I'm glad he's in this series. I'm glad this has found a home on Amazon, and some of the creators are Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, which is, again, those are 2 pretty big names behind this, and I think Amazon Prime is just the perfect place for this. Amazon Prime has been lacking a bit in its content, especially when you compare it to like Netflix and even like Hulu and that kind of stuff. It's very hard to... They have good shows for sure. Man in the High Castle, that kind of stuff. They have shows that are very good, but I just feel like the amount of stuff that's on there, the amount of content, is just not up to par. And also, I don't know what it is, but they get movies in for like a few weeks or something and they leave, because I always put stuff on my watch list, and when I go to watch it, it's no longer available on Prime. I have to rent it for like $3.99 or something. So I don't know why that is, but that's another thing that kind of deters me from searching as much, because if you don't want to watch it right at that moment, it could be leaving, and I know it gives you the little warning like, oh, it's, this show's only here for the rest of the month, or it's leaving on this date, but I would just like to see them put out more original content. Like I said, it's not the quality of their content, it's just kind of the amount of their content, because they have some good shows, but there's just a few. And The Boys looks fun, it looks original. Like I said, they have two big names behind it, Rogan and Goldberg, and Carl Urban up there, and the premise looks interesting. I it's not that I hate superhero movies or shows, but I just like when they're done like Watchmen, or they're a little bit grittier. And The Boys looks gritty. It looks like fun. It looks action-packed. It doesn't look small budget either, because that's kind of tough when you try to make a superhero movie on such a tiny little budget. It doesn't look super. So that's interesting. I'll definitely be tuning in. And that premieres July 26th, so end of this month. And the new Lord of the Rings show has started filming, or plans to start filming, and they're going to film part of it in New Zealand, just like the original trilogy of movies was. And this is, of course, the prequel taking place 3,000 years before Frodo and the gang. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how many people are still wanting to see The Lord of the Rings. Because it's been a little bit since the trilogy came out, and I loved it. I was a big Lord of the Rings fan. I watched those movies endlessly, so I'll be watching as well. Again, this is an Amazon, so maybe they are amping up their content, and it just hasn't all come out yet. But I'm hoping it's good, but I just have my doubts with all these reboots, all these sequels and prequels, and lack of original ideas. I know that there's tons of the Lord of the Rings stories, tons of stories for Middle-earth. I mean, there's tons of video games, there's books and all that. So I know there's definitely source material out there for more stories from Middle-earth, but I don't know. I'm just, like I said, until I see the finished product, I'm always skeptical of these reboots and these sequels, trilogies, prequels, all of it from older movies, older shows. Just because of one thing that bothers me is the prevalence of CGI. I think it's a great tool, but just the overuse throws me off and puts me out of a movie. I don't enjoy lots of CGI. It can look really good, but you still know it's CGI. It can look great, it can look real even, but I know those explosions aren't real. Those are CGI. I know that army isn't real, that's CGI. So I'm just wondering how much they're going to use in this show. And I'm sure it's going to be a ton. And even in the original Lord of the Rings, the first two, like Two Towers and stuff, they used CGI. It just wasn't as much. But, when there's that big sweeping shot with Saruman and his army, that's CGI. So I get it. I don't mind using it every once in a while, but when your movie uses it as a crutch or relies too heavily on it, it takes me out of the movie, and I don't enjoy it as much. So, we'll see what happens. Again, I'll be watching because it's interesting. There hasn't been really. I mean, they had the Hobbit movies. That's another one, I guess. The Hobbit. Yeah. Sorry. Excuse me. I didn't enjoy that one. I didn't enjoy that trilogy. I thought it was just not as good as Return of the King, Fellowship, and Two Towers. Those three. So we'll see if people still want to see it. I'm sure it'll get views just because of its name. But again, I'm just skeptical until I see the finished product. All right, let's move on to some movie news. Knives Out, Rian Johnson's newest film, has gotten a trailer. And the cast is absolutely stacked. Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Jamie Lee Curtis, Toni Collette, Don Johnson, Michael Shannon, Lakeith Stanfield. Christopher Plummer. That's a stacked cast. But the trailer, it's basically a murder mystery, a cozy type Agatha Christie murder mystery. And I'm trying to not let myself get too excited because Rian Johnson has disappointed me again and again throughout his career, from Brick to The Last Jedi. In my opinion, he's been a huge disappointment. He is the perfect example of great idea, poor execution. And to me, that's his career. He has some great ideas. He just executes poorly. And I think that has more to do with his writing than his directing. I just don't think his screenplays are very strong. But the trailer, I mean, it got me going. It gets you interested. Basically, the father, the patriarch of the house, is murdered with all the family present, and Daniel Craig is kind of this southern detective, and he is in the house investigating, and he wants everybody to stay until he solves the case. So very much like an Agatha Christie, like I said, cozy murder mystery. I will probably go see it. My curiosity will get the better of me, but there were a few lines in there that kind of made me go oof, that came off as very robotic and very just like I said, book-like. I don't know if they'll make it into the final cut. Who knows? Could just be trailer lines. But again, it's just hard for me to trust Rian Johnson. But the cast is just so amazing that it might just be worth it to go see all those names alone. And Chris Evans, of course, is post Captain America, so his character was very different from Captain America. Just in the trailer, he's kind of a goofball instigator. He's arguing with the family in the trailer, wearing a robe. So yeah, that it's interesting to see Chris Evans. Daniel Craig is always great. Toni Collette, of course. Jamie, like I said, the list of names is just absurd. So, if you definitely check the trailer out. But if you're into that kind of murder mystery, cozy style, you'll probably enjoy it. And another trailer we got was for the new Mulan, the live-action Mulan movie. Wasn't a very long trailer, but what was in the trailer kind of confused me as to the direction they're going. Obviously, everybody knows the Disney animated film. And this just didn't look too much like that. There was kind of some strange scenes where it seemed like Mulan was a martial arts master. She was doing kind of these acrobatics and these fighting moves, and just seemed kind of strange to me. Looked like we didn't get introduced to every single character or anything like that, but there was no Mushu, which is like a big no-no for me. Again, visually it looks pretty interesting, but again, it didn't bear a whole lot of resemblance to the animated film, which I guess I'm kind of biased because I always love those the most, and these live actions will never really do it for me. But yeah, there was no Mushu, and again, she just going based off of the animated film. Mulan wasn't some superhero fighter. She was competent, but the movie makes her seem like they're gonna make her able to fight like multiple opponents at once and stuff like that, which is kind of strange to me. But it's the first trailer. It was just a short one. I'm sure we'll get plenty more before it comes out. Some of the cinematography looked pretty good. It looks like some of the shots seemed very dramatic as well. That trailer, the way it was cut, didn't seem super kid friendly to me. Wasn't a lot of colors. Wasn't a lot of life, I felt like. So again, just a teaser trailer. So hopefully when they do a longer trailer, it'll show a little bit more of those kind of things that everyone loved in the animated movie. But yeah, just kind of a peculiar trailer for Mulan. So hopefully we get a better one. And here's something I didn't really want to talk about, but it's in the news cycle, so why not? The casting of Halle Bailey as the little Ariel, the Little Mermaid, and I guess some people are upset because she's not white, I guess is the thing. She's a black girl. Who cares? I mean, honestly, it's a fictional story, and it's just very, very weird to me that people are hung up on stuff like this still in 2019. But I just wanted to mention that I just think it's completely idiotic. Who cares? It's a mermaid. Mermaids aren't real, in case those people didn't know. There's talking animals also are not real. But I don't know. It's just it's weird that there's. I'm sure it's not that many people who are actually outraged by it. Just the internet always makes it seem like more people are upset than actually are. But it was just the fact that there was any sort of pushback at all is just strange to me. It's like, yeah, maybe it's not the way you wanted it. Sure, if that's, but just to rant on Twitter about that is very weird, disturbing, especially since most of these people are adults who are complaining. You just have nothing better to do but tweet about how this Ariel isn't the Ariel they remember. Very weird, very, very strange, and unfortunate part of the news cycle lately. But it's fake. It's a movie. It's if you don't like it. Get over it. I don't know what to say to those people. And Netflix is saying that they are going to cut down on their movie spending for their original movies after Triple Frontier, which was the military action movie that Netflix acquired. They spent $115 million on it. And it had Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac, Pedro Pascal. And they're saying it just didn't do as well as they thought, so they're going to start cutting back. Spent, like I said, $115 million. I don't know. Because to me, Netflix has always done very well with their shows, not their movies. Most of the time, I'm disappointed with their movies. There are a few here and there. I liked Hold the Dark. Every once in a while, there's a movie that's good, but I feel like for the most part, their movies are very hit or miss. And but you don't need to spend $100 million to make a good film. That's another thing. You can see plenty of low-budget movies that are excellent. So I don't think that necessarily means just that they're giving up on their movies, on their original movies. They're just going to be spending less. So hopefully that will bring some, creative filmmakers to Netflix. Hopefully they'll be able to feel like they can get their projects made. Because like I said, you don't need to spend $100 million to have a good movie. There are plenty of movies that were made for significantly less that are much better than these $100 million films out today that the studios pump out. But it's just interesting to kind of hear Netflix is taking a step back from films. And like I said, they might have realized it as well that their Stranger Things is more popular than any movie they've put out. That kind of stuff. So focusing on that could be their strategy. I don't know, but I just know that I've mostly been disappointed with them. I watched Triple Frontier. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was cool. It was fun. I mean, I didn't think it was the greatest thing ever, greatest action movie ever, or anything like that. But I thought it was interesting. Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac, Pedro Pascal in those roles, they were great. The action was cool. It was tight. Locations were interesting. Plot was interesting. It was good, but didn't bring as many viewers as Netflix thought. So they're going to cut back on their spending. I hope they don't give up on movies entirely, because I just think these streaming places are great for independent filmmakers and for real creatives to get their stuff out there. When they can't go the mainstream studio route or or they just have to put it out on like YouTube or something like that where they don't get as much fanfare or as much publicity. But yeah, Netflix cutting back on their spending on their original films. It is time for a movie review, and this week it is Spider-Man Far From Home, directed by John Watts, written by Chris McKenna and Eric Summers. So, I'll start off with what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it after that. So, I enjoyed the performances, were all good. Jake Gyllenhaal is in it. He's great. It's cool to see Jake Gyllenhaal in a mainstream movie after his string of just fantastic performances in more indie films. Nightcrawler, even like Prisoners. He's always been great, but it's good to see him land kind of like a marquee role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he knocked it out of the park. He was fantastic. Loved his performance. Tom Holland is likable. He's good. He's a good Peter Parker. Tobey Maguire will always be my Peter Parker, though. But I thought he did a good job. The humor in this one comes off less forced than in all of the other Marvel films. It's just more natural, and I enjoyed it. I laughed. There were obviously a few jokes that here and there, that you're just kind of like, oh, well, that's just put in there to kind of show that, hey, we're a movie that appeals to everyone, of every age, and I just could do without those. But the humor's good, performances were good, plot was all right. I thought plot was solid. I thought this is a post-Endgame film. So they're dealing with the aftermath of Endgame, and there's a bit of exposition in the beginning that shows you this, where they're talking about, and this is spoiler, if you haven't seen Endgame, I mean, it's been so long, but just the deaths of Iron Man, of Tony Stark, that kind of looms over this film. Especially Tom Holland, it's really a big part of this film that Tony Stark has died, and that Peter Parker doesn't really know what to do. He feels a little bit lost emotionally. It's like he's lost a father figure, and that's one of the themes running through this is, are you going to be the next Iron Man? Are you going to be the next Iron Man? Who's going to be the next Iron Man? Over and over, the press are asking him these questions. He's asking himself these questions, and there's a lot of self-doubt, which is very realistic. Because, again, Peter Parker is supposed to be in high school. He's a high school kid. He's not a full-grown man. He's not fully developed emotionally. And I thought they nailed that. His kind of development, he's got a crush on MJ. He's dealing with other things. He doesn't want to go save the world. He wants to go on the setting for this is they're in Europe on a summer school trip. And, Peter Parker likes MJ. He wants to just live his life as a normal teenager. So he doesn't really he's reluctant. He's a reluctant hero. So I thought that there were some good strings here, good plot threads, good emotions, and stuff like that kept you grounded in a superhero movie. And that was great. I thought that was interesting. It made it more enjoyable for me to see Peter really struggle, and his emotional struggle, his inner turmoil leads him to make a critical mistake, which is a big plot point in the film. I won't. Again, this is a spoiler-free review for this film, so I'm going to try to not give too much away. But that has a real effect on the plot. It's not just a written there just because, or just to give him a little bit of depth. It's really an integral part of the film, which I again enjoyed. And action sequences are very awesome. They're one of my favorite for sure. Some of the fight sequences. There's even a very trippy scene, which I particularly enjoyed. Fight sequence, and obviously there's a final battle because there is in every Marvel film, and that was very well done. That was a lot of fun to watch. Like I said, I thought that it was solid. It was a lot of fun. Samuel L. Jackson is great as Nick Fury as usual. He's in this film. Their supporting performances I thought were good, even just like one-off scenes. Like there's a kind of a funny scene where Peter Parker's in the room with this girl, and he has to change into his costume, and it's just kind of like an awkward, funny, totally like teenage scene. So there's a lot of good things to be said about this movie. I enjoyed it. I thought it was, good. But there were, let's get to the negatives now. There were a few things that I thought were questionable. I thought the main villain's motivations were just very, like I said, questionable. I weren't really believable. It just felt like there wasn't as much time spent on the villain as there was the hero, which is, of course, it's a hero. It's his movie. It's Peter Parker's movie. I get it. But his motivation was just kind of slapped on, I felt like, and kind of generic compared to even someone like Thanos. Thanos, I just felt like his motivations were more believable. His motivations were more intense. And the main villain in Spider-Man Far From Home, just not as believable. I felt like he was just and this is fine. He's just there for Peter Parker's development. And that is fine as long as it doesn't look like he's just there for Peter Parker's development. You're supposed to be kind of fooled into thinking that he's super important, that this is a real threat, that kind of deal. And it just didn't fool me at all. It was just, to me, pretty obvious that he's just kind of a footnote in the story. And the real story was, like I said before, Peter Parker emotionally grappling with the loss of Tony Stark and just growing up. And it had the aspect of a high school movie, which was fun. But that's where it fell flat. Just the main villain's motivation, not believable for me, which I don't want to say it ruined the movie, but kind of put a damper on it because that's the whole point is hero fighting a villain. But when it's the villain is kind of weak, written in a weak way, or a way where it's apparent he's just kind of like a stepping stone for the hero, and not someone who's truly testing the hero, testing his convictions as well as his physical limitations. That's another thing, is the physicality of the villain was not very convincing as well. I just didn't feel like he was a physical match for Peter Parker, which it can be done because we've seen in The Dark Knight the Joker and Batman. Obviously, the Joker is no match for Batman in a fist fight, but it was written so well that it felt like he possibly could be, or he had other ways to beat Batman. And in this, the villain poses a threat. Don't get me wrong; it's not like he's a puppy dog, but it was just, like I said, hard for me to believe. I didn't really buy it a lot. It wasn't a good sell, so it kind of put a damper on the story for me. But overall, I thought the film was a fun ride. If you're a Marvel fan, you'll enjoy it, especially if you're craving something after Endgame. A lot of fun, a very fun film, a fun hero film, as well as a high school film. It is about a high school kid, so it has that vibe to it. And definitely recommend. I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And that's about all I got, so thank you for listening to this episode of FilmBookCast. You can find more of my work on film-book.com. Just search for Tyler Saito or FilmBookCast. You can also find me on Twitter. My handle is @TDSAITO317. If you listen to this podcast on iTunes or another podcast service, please rate and review this episode. If you're listening to this podcast on our YouTube channel, FilmBook Podcast, please like our video, subscribe to our channel, and leave us a comment in the comment section. If you'd like to contribute to this podcast, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/FilmBook and become one of our patrons. Any support you could throw our way would be appreciated. Tune in next time. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.